accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, Green Lantern fans, to episode number 173 of the podcast of OA. This episode, we're going to be revisiting the Geoff Johns run of Green Lantern and talking about the second issue of his relaunch from 2005. We've got a brand new Know the Core segment, and we've also got some Green Lantern news and listener feedback. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, and I am joined, as always, by our good friend Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how are you doing this great day?
I'm doing great, and a big hello to all the fellow Owens out there in the Lanternverse. Things are moving along here, getting ready and prepped up for the school year to come. So it's going to be an interesting education system this year.
Yo, boy, howdy! The organization I work for is a cooperative, so we provide services to school districts, and basically I work in the IT department. Most of the school districts in our region, about 17 of those districts, have outsourced all of their IT to us, including their internet service. And as we're starting to hear some of the plans for virtual education from the classroom, we started doing the math about how much bandwidth we're going to need. Oh, yeah. And we were looking at, we have a 4 gig internet pipe, and we usually use about 3 gig for our region. And we figured out, mathematically speaking, if 80% of the teachers are all streaming at the same time, we're going to need about 14 gigs of internet pipe service. So
I was going to say, man, a lot of these places are going to have to upgrade their servers, man. That's just going to be how this is going to work.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting.
It is. It is. Here we are, though. That's just the way it's going to be, man. People are going to have to get used to this new type of intermediate normal, I guess you could say.
I don't know if I'd use the word normal, but whatever our air quote new normal is going to be, I guess.
Right.
Wow. In this part of the world, I'm getting ready this weekend to celebrate my 33-year wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations, man. Mad props to you and the wife. Wow. 33 years, huh?
33 years, yeah. So I will have been married to my wife longer than I've been not married to her by a long shot, because I'm 55. So
there should be like a medal. You reach that plateau in your life, you know?
I was picking on her the other day. I'm 55 and my wife is 63, and we were going to go out to a British pub to see a Beatles tribute band play, and my wife went to the website and it said click if you're above age 21, and I said to her, maybe you should click it 3 times. I don't remember what happened after that. It's kind of all blur. But
probably a few select phrases.
I woke up on the floor. No. We have a lot of, not that I pick on my wife. We have a lot of fun picking about on each other about our age difference. So I couldn't pass up the opportunity, because 3 times 21 is her age. It was perfect.
Denise's birthday was August 1st.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and she's 34, and I'm 46, so there's an age difference with us too.
It can be a source of humor, as long as it's always good-natured.
It is. Having a little 6-month-old around actually helps. There's a little bit of buffer there.
You've got a built-in distraction.
Exactly. Boy, he's getting big, man. Oh, Clark, now he's mobile, so he's everywhere, getting into everything. It's my wife sent me a video the other day. I was at work, because I've been working through our district headquarters, and she sent me a video, and it was funny because the video panned around the corner, and she goes, "Yep, I walked around the corner into this," and then it panned down, and there's Clark on the floor with his hands inside the dog's water bowl, just playing.
That's great.
Oh, it was fantastic. I could not help but laugh. I keep watching it because it's so adorable. I'll have to send it to you. I love it. It's great. He's doing good, man. 6.5 months, and eating like crazy, eating everything. We went out the other night finally for her birthday, and we went to this place called Fitz's in Del Mar in the Loop here in St. Louis, and I had fish tacos, and I gave him some pieces of fish. Man, he was eating it up. He was loving it.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great. It was nice to get out. We sat outside, and it was nice because we were in the back and we were away from whatever people were out there, and it felt good to get out. But it's at the same time, there's still a lot of hesitation being out and about, because there's still so much, it's still so much of an atmosphere of uncertainty. But we enjoyed it. We had a good time with him, and it was fun.
Good for you. Good for you to getting out there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, speaking of people getting back to their lives, we talked last episode about a podcast of OA listener Daryl, who's in our Facebook group, and that he was in the hospital battling COVID-19. And I just wanted to give a quick update about Daryl. Daryl is now home and is still fighting COVID-19, but obviously doing well enough to be home, which is fantastic news.
Now, do you know if he's had a lot of, I mean, I know I don't know if it's how do you say it, the good and the bad part of COVID-19. I mean, has he had a lot of the really, really severe symptoms, or do you know?
I don't know. He did not say.
Okay.
But I'm just glad to hear that he's home and recuperating and getting stronger, and that's just fantastic news. So Daryl, if you're listening, we continue to be pulling for you and thinking about you.
Exactly. Do you have to get tested? We had to get tested in our district.
No, I haven't had to have any testing done.
I got my test and I got my results back. I'm negative, so that's a good thing.
I'm hoping they let us know so I can study. Oh, the other thing was my spinner rack showed up. I've been posting it on social media, and I just shot a YouTube video the other day going through that, and I love it. I love it so much. I find myself walking into my lantern cave and just flipping it, making it go around and looking at the books, even though I know full well what's in there. But just it's that experience that you had as a kid.
I love it, man. When you sent that picture, I was like, oh, and I showed it to my wife. She's like, oh, that's really, really cool. It's like, yeah, I know it is.
I'm going to get you in more trouble.
You are. You totally are.
One of the things that I thought was really cool, these are a little thicker. They're about an inch thick. So I got the entire Crisis on Infinite Earths in one spot. It was that thick. I got those DC Showcase softcover books. They're like an inch thick. They fit in there.
I was zooming in on it, man. I was looking at your collection on there.
Well, one of the things I did it was, we all as collectors and comic book fans, a lot of us, probably most of us, keep our boxes, our comic books bagged and boarded in long boxes.
Yep, yeah, that's the norm.
And I decided to take out all the books that I had autographed, and it's not very many. I think it's maybe a dozen or so books that I've gotten autographed over the years. And I took them and I put them in one row, or one column, I should say. And it was really kind of neat because when you have them in your long boxes, they're out of sight, out of mind. And having them displayed in this manner, I walk into the room and it's one of the ones I have facing outward. So I see all the autographed books, and I remember when I got to meet Marv Wolfman and Joe Staton, and they signed that book, that issue that meant so much to me. That was just, to have it out here, I'm reminded of it more constantly than if it were in my long box and I'd have to remember to go pull it out and look at it. So for that alone, I think it's really worth it. And of course, I had to put Showcase 22 in there just because that was a book that I bought when my mother passed. And it's a very special book, not only because it's the debut of the Silver Age Green Lantern, but because of what the book represents to me personally. It's something I bought is kind of an ode to my mom. But just having this stuff out there just makes it so nice. And if you have a small collection, you could get, I think I did the math, I think you could get between 460 and 480 books in there, depending on how you arranged them. But
that's a pretty good, yeah, that's a really good amount you can get on there.
Yeah. And I ran into a glitch for people that didn't watch the YouTube video. I ran into a glitch where when I unboxed it, it wasn't able to spin because it was sitting on the bottom base, and there wasn't anything for it to float on, and there was no instructions, and there was this pin in there, and what you had to do is you had to lift up the rack, and there's a ball bearing disc, a disc of ball bearings underneath that slides up that you put the pin through, and it elevates it, and then it has something to sit on and float on. And unfortunately, there were no instructions, so I emailed them, and I got a response within 24 hours on a weekend. So, spinnerrack.com gave me some great customer service there, I felt, and I was up and going within 24 hours.
It's crazy. I'm not sure how much you paid for it, but I was like pricing them myself and stuff. And it's like, if you think about back in the times when you collected comic books, and back in my early days of collecting comic books, you went to these spinner racks that were in these, these convenience stores, whatever they were in, whatever they're located in. And it's like, they were junk, they were just, half the time they were crooked, and they screeched or whatever, they made squeaks. And it's like, you think back then they were just an insignificant item, and then fast forward to now, where they become such a nostalgic piece to your collection, and they're pricey. I mean, they're pricey. A lot of them are really, really upwards, as far as when you want to purchase them. Where did you get yours from? Spinnerrack.com?
Spinnerrack.com. So they're a company that I think they started out doing a Kickstarter, and now they're a full-fledged company, and they make them in two sizes. They make them for your golden age on up through today's comics, and then they make one for CGC books, which are a little bit oversized. So they make them in two sizes, and depending on which size you get, it varies on price. And if you pre-order it, like, what they seem to do is different manufacturing runs. So if they're out of them and it's before their next manufacturing run, they usually offer them at a little bit of a discount. But I want to say it was right around $370, $370, $100 shipping. So you gotta add $100 to it. But the reason why the shipping is so high is there's really no assembly. So this is shipped to you complete. The only thing you had to do was, like I said, lift that up and put the pins underneath the ball bearings, and then assemble the little sign piece that pops in the top that you put your vintage comic book signs, the Hey Kids comics and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, they're not cheap, but the thing about like collecting these days is like nothing is. But then again, you can also say, well, it's probably not so much that they're not cheap. It's just so much as we don't have the money that we used to have back then when we floated around. Mom and Dad used to buy. I mean, Mom and Dad bought my comic books all the time. And I remember going into this place called Shortstop, and it was up the road from my house. And my dad always had to stop in there and get his whatever, milk, eggs. They had everything in this place, and that was where I always got my comic books. And I remember the first comic book I actually purchased when I was a kid, and it was G.I. Joe issue #1 that was produced by Marvel.
Oh, that's cool.
Back in the day, right? And that was my norm, though. I kept going. I got them all, and because I was into G.I. Joe at the time, and then of course Superman and the superheroes came later on when I started getting more involved with reading them and stuff. But I remember the display. It was blue. I remember it was blue, and it was paint chipped, and not a lot of people went to the comic books. Besides the kids. And I bought the comic books and got some bubble gum or whatever else candy my dad wanted to purchase, and went on about my merry business. But nowadays it's it's not as cost effective as it was when we were growing up.
No, that's for sure. Well, and you can still find vintage comic book racks out in the secondary market, but lots of times when I've gone to look, they're like $700 and up for a vintage rack, and they're still not as manufactured as well as this is. This is designed, in today's era, so it's got ball bearings and very nice powder coating. You can get it in white wire, you can get it in black wire, whichever you want. I'm just really, really happy with it. I know I've been very enthusiastic, so I kind of feel like I sound like I'm pimping for the company, but I thought it's such a neat addition to have. And it seems like today everybody's focused on what makes us different, and you go back to a whole generation of comic book fans, and no matter where we lived, we all shared that common experience of going to the drugstore or the convenience store and buying our books from these wire racks. It seems silly, but it's such a great piece of nostalgia.
Yeah, it really is. And you know what? It adds that gravitas to your collection. It looks good. And you got your little. And I when you said that picture, I was like, oh man. And then of course I was looking at your other collections and stuff like that. And a lot of mine's still in the box at my parents' house. As a matter of fact, a couple weeks back we went and visited them because they wanted to see Clark, and I went downstairs and I finally found the box that I put all my Blackest Night figures in and stuff like that. And I had them all. I had Parallax in there. I had my Cyborg Superman in there, and I found it. And I was like, oh God, I couldn't remember what box I put them in, and I was hell bent on trying to find the box that had all these items, but I ended up finding them. And I even had the big Mogul. Remember him?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the big Archillo with his tongue hanging around his neck. And so I'm waiting because my wife and I we're kind of kicking around buying a house, and I'm kind of waiting to see what comes out of that before I start making my own little man cave. I'm afraid that if I put it out here, little Clark's gonna get into it, and yeah, well, I'm not gonna have that, man.
Yeah, people keep asking to see the rest of my air quote lantern cave, so I'm probably going to be shooting a video that does a walkthrough of everything I've got kind of laid out and what it looks like and stuff, and we'll go from there.
Man. You should. Emerald Enthusiast has been sending me some videos of his stuff, his collections and everything, and he's got some stuff too, man. That guy's got a mean collection as well.
Definitely. And I do also want to talk about a little bit of an apology. I've been wanting to review the Green Lantern 80th hardcover and the Space Traveling Heroes hardcover, but my local comic shop still has not gotten their copies from Diamond Comics yet. It's crazy. I was just talking to him today, and he said it's very frustrating because he'll get boxes that are delivered. He has no idea what's coming when. They no longer have customer reps, so he can't get answers to find out where things are. Whereas he said, his stuff, where, he's buying stuff through UCS, which is one of DC's 2 distributors. And he said he hasn't had any shortages, no damages. The shipping is cheaper than Diamond was for him. So he's very frustrated with the whole system that Diamond has and how they've been kind of falling down since COVID started.
That's a shame. I mean, that's a real shame. That's like, and because I was going to order that 80th hardback edition, but I'm going to probably get a hold of Apotheosis and see if they can get a hold of it. But if they're going to have the same kind of difficulties, I'm going to be left to having to order it through Amazon, and I'd rather not do that if I don't have to.
That's the conversation I had today with Jared, my guy at my local comic shop at Heroes Your Mom Throughout Comics. And I just said, I'm sorry. I want to support the store, but at the same time, this has been 3 or 4 weeks, and I really, by the time I get the book and get a chance to talk about it, it's not going to be relevant anymore. And he more than understood, but it's just a crappy thing to have happen. But
it's a shame that these distributors, and I guess this all took place with the whole Diamond thing, and then DC, changing their distributors. I guess that's where it all took place. But I wonder, like, the person in charge, I wonder if they actually know that they're having that much difficulty getting merchandise to their fans.
Yeah, I don't know. He just said the frustration as a retailer is he doesn't even have a customer service agent, so he can check on things, or, he can put things in saying he didn't get something, but he has no idea when they're going to get anything to respond to that because they don't hear anything back. So it's just frustrating right now. And I understand we're all, in the grand scheme of things, our comics are not a big thing, but it's also a business, and you got a lot of small comic shops that are, struggling right now, and Diamond isn't making it any easier for them. He basically said, boy, I wish they were all going to the other distributor, and he would drop Diamond himself if he could, but he can only get DC stuff through UCS right now.
That's a shame. On a side note, I do want to give a shout out to one of my Twitter followers, Carolus Augustus, and he's at Carol V SAVG. Good long-time listener, big Green Lantern fan. We had a nice little chat in DM the other night. He's a fellow educator down in Florida. He was reached out to me, because I used to teach fifth grade, and I'm an administrator now at my high school, and he reached out to me looking for some pointers because he's going to be a team leader for his fifth grade teaching team down in Florida, and I had a real nice conversation with him. And we're going to start sharing some ideas and stuff through our emails and everything, but he said, he's a longtime fan, loves our podcast and stuff. So big shout out to him. And I told him I'd like to get him on the show sometime. So he said probably maybe next month he'd reach out and we'll see if we can hook something up with him.
Cool.
But his name's Carlos Diego. Real nice guy. Great Twitter fan. He's not into the hardcore fandom like some of these guys are. He's definitely not a troll, but he's a good guy to follow. So anybody out there listening, check him out.
And what was the Twitter handle again?
Hold on, let me get it right here. It's at CarolVSAVG.
Gotcha.
Carolus Augustus.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got a little bit of stuff to talk about here. We've got the second issue of Geoff Johns' Green Lantern run to go through, and we've got some listener feedback, and you've got a brand new Know the Core segment. So why don't we pause for a second and we can talk about the Know Your Core segment, and then we'll be right back.
All right. All right, fellow Owens, and welcome back to the Know Your Core. And this person we have from the planet of Rexus 4, Arisia, Green Lantern of Space Sector 2815. Her first appearance took place in Tales of the Green Lantern Corps #1, May of 1981, created by Mike Barr, Len Wein, and Joe Staton. And now Arisia, her father Fentara, served as the Green Lantern of Space Sector 2815. Eventually, she assumed the role of Green Lantern of her sector as a teenager. She was part of a large group of Green Lanterns who went to thwart Krona and Necron while the Guardians of the Universe attempted valiantly to try and halt Necron's influence on the universe and try to seal the portal Necron was attempting to pass through. She was one of the Green Lanterns, along with Katmatui, Salak, and Chip, who referred to her as the Big Cutie, and Kilowog, who relocated to Earth after the battle against the Anti-Monitor. And her full name is Arisia Rab. I guess I said that right, Arab. And her partner is none other than my all-time favorite, Sodom Yacht. And there you have it, fellow Owens. Arisia from Sector 2815 on the Know Your Core segment. And I'll have another one for you next week, and we'll have a new one continuing. I like this segment. I like to get to know these core members as much as everybody else does, because there's so many of them, and they're so diverse, and they're complex. So stay tuned. Another one coming at you next week.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
Welcome back, fellow Owens. We're here to talk about the second issue of the Geoff Johns run from 2005. And this issue, obviously written by Geoff Johns, drawn also by Carlos Pacheco. And this continues the whole Manhunter, the reestablishment of them in this new, I don't want to necessarily say new continuity, but this new era of Green Lantern. And, it's interesting because this version of Manhunter, the Manhunter 2.0, looks very humanoid, but by the end of this issue, we find out that that's really just a ruse. But this issue is really kind of interesting in that it fleshes out the whole Captain Perlman, cowgirl, gives you more information on her, talks about how Hal's uniform is kind of both hot and cold, and it's made out of energy. It kind of reinforces that notion, gives us more layers behind the relationship between Hal and Colonel Stone, and why Hal got into the fight with him and got kicked out of the Air Force, which is really kind of a neat story because it says a lot about Hal, but it also shows how he's not willing to compromise, and sometimes will be very creative in how he gets out of certain situations without sacrificing his own character.
Well, it also touches on him as his more rogue status, not rogue in a good way, because he wants to do things his own way, and he doesn't like to be inhibited, or he doesn't like to be suppressed, more or less. And it was really cool when I went back and read it. I kind of picked up on a lot of that from him and his character, much like his relationship with his brother, revolving around the Coast City thing.
Right. And here it really kind of undercuts the whole thing that Hal had to quit. We don't really know why at this point yet, but he had to quit the Air Force, but he couldn't quit because it's just not in his nature. So he gets himself into a fight with his colonel to get himself thrown out of the Air Force, which kind of shows just some of the, the logic that kind of goes through Hal's mind that, I can't quit. I'm not a quitter. I'm never going to quit, but you'll do something that really burns that bridge, for lack of a better analogy, like punching out your commanding officer.
I know, true. And it's funny when he did, because it's funny when he first sees him, and he's like, he has to suck up his pride somewhat, because the way it's alluded to is it's been a long time since he's ran into him, because when they show the flashback scene, they're both, he's obviously younger. General Stone's younger, and then when it fast forwards, he seems like he's aged a lot, or at least a few years anyway.
Sure. And one of the things that happens is that Colonel Stone is now at the testing range and stuff, and in order for Hal to get back into the Air Force and to get his job back, he's got to go through Stone to do it. So he's got to kind of reconcile that piece of his history. And here you can see where when he does get back involved with General Stone, and they discover that the plane that Jillian Perlman was flying, the X-2020, has alien technology in it, and he's trying to get more information about it, and Stone is like, well, it's classified. And Hal can't be down on the same level as him. He's floating above Stone, and he basically, after Stone tries to dismiss him, it's that understood ... sir kind of thing, which I thought was just great. Nice little character moments that aren't beating you over the head. And in the meantime, you still have this tractor trailer on its way to Edwards Air Force Base with the Old Man Hunter on it. And, John Stewart shows up, and he's investigating what's left of the tourist bus that the Manhunter destroyed in the last issue. And soon these two things are going to connect. But like you said, Hal has some moments again with his brother Jim, excuse me. But they make reference to Jack, and Jack being having passed away, which I think I missed that the first time I read the series, because I kind of wondered what happened to Jack. I'd missed out on the fact that he passed away. But basically, it's just Hal and his brother now, and his brother's family. That's all that's left of the Jordan family at this point.
I know they're the only two left in Coast City, with the way it looks.
Yeah, because it's interesting because Johns is still painting not Gotham, at Coast City as this ghost town, and people aren't there. And there's this neat little subtext where when Jim is leaving town after trying to talk Hal into going with him, and he's driving away, and he's listening to the radio reports about how they may pull the construction away from Coast City and shut it down because people aren't showing up like they thought they would. And I, as much as we hate adding the Batman to it, it was interesting to see that Wayne Enterprises invested in the rebuilding of Coast City, which I thought was kind of a neat touch considering what Geoff Johns does with the Batman-Hal relationship during Rebirth. But the neat little symbolism with Jim is he turns the radio off and doesn't want to hear any more about Coast City as he's leaving. And you see the bumper sticker in the back of his car saying, "Better safe than sorry, keep your distance," which I thought was really neat, a neat touch.
Yeah, that was cool. And then off and drives into the sunset, which looks like a barren plain. It's like Coast City must be in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's on the West Coast, obviously out on the coast, but I think because of the destruction of Coast City, nobody's been there and nobody really wants to be there. It literally is the ghost town. And, you've got Hal sitting there hoping that, I don't want to say hoping, but figuring people were going to show up, and he can't give up on it, which is kind of neat. Right. But we see more about, Hangar 44 and the alien spaceships, and the Manhunter shows up, it triggers Hal's ring, and the Manhunter comes out and Hal gets into a tussle with the old Manhunter 1.0, as his brother's leaving town. And they get into a fight, and you see some interesting fighting. You see Hal make a jet construct, which is always fun to see. And Hal gets knocked into the hangar, and what's in there but a recreation, a reverse engineered version of Abin Sur's ship, which was really kind of a neat thing.
That was neat. There also was a good point when he's talking to that other military guy, and the guy says, "Admit you made a mistake and tell him why you did it." And then Hal's got no comment.
Yeah, Hal doesn't answer. And that's Shane Sellers. I don't remember what his call sign is, but he's a character who appears in the beginning as Geoff is trying to reestablish Hal's supporting cast.
I got you. Sellers, yeah, right.
And it's interesting that, as Hal is fighting the Manhunter 1.0, Manhunter 2.0 shows up. And there's a neat little pun there that the new Manhunter blows the arm off of, or the hand off of the Manhunter 1.0, and Hal goes, "Thanks for the hand," which was kind of a subtle humor there. But once the new Manhunter realizes what's going on, he attacks Hal as well. And the fight continues, and we come to find out that the very humanoid-looking Manhunter 2.0 looks nothing like that. That's basically a guise that's put over top of his metal flesh, his metal skin. And underneath is a completely redesigned version of the Manhunter, which I really kind of like.
Yeah, he's pretty cool looking. I like the suit that he's wearing.
Yeah, I think it's really neat. It kind of inverts the colors a little bit from the traditional Manhunter colors. It kind of stands out a little bit more with the color contrast, with the blue against the red. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was really kind of cool looking.
Well, worth noting too that the title of this particular story arc is No Fear.
Yes, yeah, I thought that was really kind of cool. And the first chapter is called Airborne. But yeah, I love the fact that the first full plot and the title of this issue is No Fear. So really cool. And I don't know. It's fun to go back and look at this because this is before we've gotten all the other colors. It's just Hal and John really, and rebuilding the Green Lantern universe from the ground up.
Yeah, and it's these old stories, man. They still hold up. I mean, you I don't know, when you read. I'm nothing against Morrison and Sharp. I like what they're doing with the series and stuff, and I'm sure that everybody has their own qualms about Green Lantern season 1 and season 2 for that matter, but these were like myth building, mythos building as far as the Lanternverse goes. I mean, like you said, they're reestablishing the core. This is before the core gets reestablished. As a matter of fact, I think a few issues from now is when they do like a Tales of the Green Lantern, not Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, but Green Lantern Recharge. Is that what it is?
Yeah, there's a mini series that kind of kicks off the reemergence of the Green Lantern Corps. Right.
Which I think is cool because again, that just gets into this whole Lanternverse building that Geoff Johns does on his run, and I love these old books, man. I love what they did with it. I love the Manhunters. I wish they did more of those. I wish they were around a little bit more. But like you said, the costume, the outfit, very cool. And I like the way they talk, they talk with the no emotion swing, and they sound awesome.
Yeah. I still stick by this, that I felt at the time, and I feel to this day, that the Manhunters would have been a better choice of a villain for the first Green Lantern film.
I would agree with that. Because they could have really, really done a great job doing some playing into the backstory, as the narrative went along in the movie.
Right. I mean, you could have been, rather than just about being overcoming fear, you could have talked about why it was better for real people to be Green Lanterns over a machine that can't really make a decision or can't feel emotion.
Exactly. Yeah. That would have played well with an audience, I think. Because everybody out there, as you know, we all battle our own emotions, it's just the nature of human nature for that matter. And that would have been a good interplay between a non-sentient being as opposed to a human figure like Hal Jordan, John Stewart for that matter, or anybody else that's in the Corps.
Right. Well, and also think about it just from a pragmatic perspective in terms of budget, in terms of CGI. You make one, you make 100.
Yeah, that would have been easy, especially with the Manhunters, and they would have been awesome on the screen. I keep envisioning what they could have done with the special effects. Now as what we see with like all these new Marvel movies and stuff like that, and the special effects are just outrageous. It would have been great to make.
Yeah, and you have to remember when you're reading these issues, it's been, at this point, 11 years since the Green Lantern Corps and the original mythology were really on the page. I mean, during the Kyle Rayner era, they kind of visited some of that stuff here and there, but they really kind of wanted to shy away from all the Silver Age trappings to remind people of Hal and what came before. They were trying to basically take Green Lantern in a new direction, and they were trying to leave all of that baggage behind. So for a lot of people, this is their first introduction to the Manhunters.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about it like that. You're right. Because the whole Geoff Johns run with Rebirth, that was a reestablishing of all the characters. So, yeah, that would have been a good seg in reintroducing them all.
Yeah, so I look at this as a lot of world building. There's still some foreshadowing here. Not a great deal of what's to come, obviously, with the whole emotional spectrum and all of those things. This is still the very beginning stages where Geoff is just trying to reestablish the universe and give us more background for Hal, because again, a lot of people who are just jumping into Green Lantern based on the popularity of Rebirth, this is really their first real taste of Hal and what he's like. So Johns is spending a lot of time to try to develop some layers that really weren't there during the Silver Age for any character.
Yeah, good point. And it's good to show like Hal on Earth, interacting with regular people, like Colonel Sellers, and General Stone for that matter, Cowgirl, being around his normal lifestyle. It seems like since the Geoff Johns run, he's so detached from Earth that it kind of makes you wonder if he even knows what the hell's going on Earth these days.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm waiting to see. I'm excited and nervous about what's going to happen after the Morrison run, just because there's just that sense of not knowing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and the thing of it is, like, I know you tweeted a couple things about like the whole secrecy behind things, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, if I'm a PR person, transparency is my first go-to. I mean, I understand that you don't want to give away too much, but there's a way to do it without giving anything away, but also keeping the fans engaged to know that you're doing what's best for them as consumers for the product. And I mean, Marvel's been great at it. I mean, there were a lot of secrecy behind the plot devices that took place in a lot of their movies, but they were always upfront about what they were doing, and it's like with this whole Green Lantern Corps series and stuff that HBO Max is going to put out, it's like you have to wait and keep waiting for any kind of news to even come out about what's being taken place. And one point that was made in that tweet that you were on was the fact that, I mean, you could give away stuff. I mean, small little tidbits of, hey, it's still in production. We're working on this. We're working on that. We're working on that. But the problem is like, it's silence. And DC has always been notorious for like not revealing anything until like they just throw it in your face, And I don't understand why their PR continues to work that way. But I mean, on the other end, your fandom's just sitting there waiting in the wings, saying, "Okay, well, we don't know what's going on." So you wait, but still don't know what's going on, and then by a certain amount of time, you just get disengaged from it. I'm sure that DC fandom will produce a lot of content, hopefully, that will allude to what's coming up. Because I mean, this Green Lantern Corps is supposed to come out next year on HBO Max, spring or something like that.
Hopefully, we'll see. But for those that don't know, DC is doing a big event called DC Fandom on August 22nd. It's supposed to be an all-day affair, and there's supposed to be all kinds of announcements and surprises and those kind of things. And so obviously we're all hoping we're going to find out something about what's going to happen with this HBO Max series. Maybe some casting or revelations of the characters or something. I would love more than anything to see like a teaser trailer and them show who's going to be in it. To me, that would be what I want to see. I'd also like to know, are we still going to get a Green Lantern Corps movie or not?
Well, and they're supposed to, and then Zack Snyder is supposed to reveal, a little bit more about the Snyder Cut for the Justice League. And, I know that I watched one of the panels from the Comic-Con here recently, and he didn't give anything away. And one of the persons, I guess, they were doing a live panel with him, and one of the persons, a lot of the comments people were making that were asking him questions was about Green Lantern. And he didn't give anything away. He didn't say anything. He left it alone, but he's got something up his sleeve. I mean, he has to, you just know he has to have something up his sleeve. But again, here we are still waiting in the wings for seeing what's going to come and what they're going to do. Just sucks waiting.
I heard that he's doing the Snyder Cut for free.
I did hear that too, and he's also supposed to reveal name recognition. I guess there's a lot of talk about if the Justice League movie is going to be named after him. I mean, my version is it should be, a film by Zack Snyder because it is his vision, his finished product, the way he wanted to have it done. Without the oppressive nature of Hollywood being on his back. But he's also supposed to reveal that come Fandom, from what I heard too. There's supposed to be a trailer when Fandom comes around, and that's August 22nd. It's a 24-hour affair. I don't foresee myself watching all 24 hours, but Twitter's going to explode with everything that's just going to come out. So.
But you're exactly right about the kind of the secrecy and the lack of PR. I think, say what you will about Dan Didio, but one of the things he did do is he did try to get people excited for DC Comics products, and he would do those little teasers, the whiteboard with things on it that you couldn't quite figure out what they were, and those kind of things. And I just don't know whether at this point DC even knows what they're doing with Green Lantern after the Morrison run.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, none of the solicitations show anything, and that's all the way up until through October, I think, is the latest ones that I've saw.
Yes.
And still just talks about, the Morrison run, but there's nothing else. There's nothing else mentioned about it. I mean, no writers are talking. I haven't heard about any writers being involved in a new project. I mean, Scott Snyder, I kind of thought, well, maybe Scott Snyder's going to take over, but he dropped Batman, and now he's not. He's stepping down off DC. He's doing his own projects and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's just it. Like, nobody's mentioning anything,
Right. And the thing is when October hits, that's the last issue of Justice League Odyssey. So then Jessica's out of a book. Yeah. So you're really only going to have John in Justice League and Hal in the Green Lantern. And that goes for 4 more issues after October. And that's it. And Far Sector, which will have 4 issues left at that point. And that'll be it. So who knows? I hope we hear something. But one of the things I don't see Jim Lee doing is being that charismatic leader who gets you excited for what's to come, or teases things, or even lets us know there's a plan.
Yeah, that's the thing that bothers me the most about it. I would assume if the HBO Max series is still going full swing and it's going to be coming out next year, I would halfway assume that what they're trying to plan right now is after the Morrison run, they're going to run a book alongside the series, maybe, and it could be a Green Lantern book. I think that would be the ideal choice I think that would be the ideal writing to go with. That way people can familiarize themselves with not only the series, but they also have it juxtaposed next to a book that could start reintroducing the core members, like Arisia for that matter, and all of them, Kilowog, bring them all back. I mean, forward thinking, that's what I would do if I was in the industry, but That's why we're sitting here doing podcasts, and we're not working for DC. But anything would be nice. I don't like the fact how DC just plays that card all the time, and it's like, well, we got to make this all secret. Don't give away plot stuff. I understand that. You don't want to give away secret stuff. That's like when Batman v Superman came out. One of the biggest things about that movie that surprised me was when Superman died. I didn't hear anything about that before that movie came out. And now, granted, 2 weeks before it was released, or a week before, I kind of stayed off social media, so nothing was given away. But I didn't hear any rumblings of the fact that they were going to do a Death of Superman in that particular movie. And when I watched it and that happened, I was like, that surprised me. I was like, okay, I like being surprised. I'm glad that nobody gave that away, or I'm glad I didn't read about it, and I'm glad there were no spoilers. But I also never heard any rumblings of the fact that they were going to do a Death of Superman inside that movie. And for me, it felt good, and it felt like it worked. But I know that the fans are divisive about that particular film as much as they are with Justice League. And God only knows when the Snyder Cut comes out, there's going to be more divisiveness. People aren't going to like this because of this, and people aren't going to like it because of this. It's like, you can't please everybody. And Liam Sharp said it the best. You can't. I just hope that there's some Green Lantern stuff in the Snyder's film. I hope there's something in there. I bet you there will be, though. Knowing him as a filmmaker, I'm willing to bet that there'll be sequences in there that'll include Green Lantern stuff.
Let's hope. And I can understand trying to keep things a secret to a point because you want to surprise people, especially if it's something really cool. But I think in terms of the comics, I understand why Jim Lee's not saying what's coming next, because you take kind of the air out of the sails of what's currently out there. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You kind of want to know, you want that reassurance that there is a plan, but at the same time, you don't necessarily want to know what the plan is.
Yeah, they got no problems giving away Batman stuff all the time. I mean, that's just it. Like everything with Batman, they always announce, the three Jokers story arc, whatever that is, or War with the Jokers, or the next thing is always the next thing with Batman. So, I mean, there's no big reveal, but yet they talk about it openly about what Batman's doing, and everything else is just slated for secrecy. And Green Lantern Corps, I mean, has been a suppressed figure for quite some time now, other than the fact that we got, Jessica over in Odyssey and John in JL, and then of course Far Sector, and then all these other, for lack of a better words, lanterns appearing from everywhere, gold lanterns and Legion, and all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, well, they're doing stuff, but what's going on with the central core of what is the Green Lantern Corps? But I don't know. We could talk all night about that.
Yes, we could. That could be a whole episode of its own.
It would. And it would just be you and I bitching about it. Not to mention that I didn't say anything in that whole spiel about Simon Bass. There's a reason for that.
All right, well, let's pause. We've got some listener feedback, and we'll come back and do that, and then wrap everything up.
All right, sounds great.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
Welcome back to the podcast of OA, and we've got some listener feedback, and this time we've got an email from Ryan, who is talking to us about episode number 172. And this is Ryan's feedback. First off, I just wanted to say thanks for the great podcast. I've been listening to you for about a year now after you were mentioned on the Lantern Cast. Keep up the good work. I just wanted to give some feedback from episode 172. Hopefully this won't be too lengthy. I enjoy the new reviews from old episodes with issues few and far between. I think it's a good idea to look back on the old issues. I didn't start reading GL until the Sinestro Corps and have only been listening to GL podcasts for a couple of years. Also, the Know the Corps segment is really cool. I really wish they would have a second GL book, but only be about the Corps members take a break from the humans. When you guys compared Liam Sharp to Alex Ross, I about spit out of my drink. I respectfully disagree with that. Liam is one of the reasons I'm not a fan of the Morrison run at all. I will say his drastic change in styles is impressive and his aliens look cool. It's just that I think his human figures are too misproportioned. Issue 3 is one of my favorites of the run just because of how good it looks. Just my opinion though, I'm glad you guys like them. When reviewing that issue, one of the GLs, you mentioned that Hal was getting back into piloting after being gone. Is there an in-universe reason why Hal has been gone? I can't remember if everyone knows Hal is GL or if his identity is secret. And if it's secret, then I wonder what his excuse is for being gone after becoming Parallax Spectre. Hey, I've been gone for years. Can I have my jab back? You talked about the possible of a GL movie again, and I think there's no chance they will use another Hal. John is probably the second most known GL due to the animated series, so it only makes sense for him to be the next GL. But I gotta say that the actress from Doom Patrol would be amazing as Jessica. Her range in Doom Patrol is fantastic. Now on to the good stuff. Agenda Comics. Smiley face. This is in reply to the message you replied to in that episode. I just gotta say that people who complain about agendas in comics drive me crazy. Imagine being in the time when Denny O'Neil released Snowbirds and people just complained, Denny is pushing an agenda. Or during the hate crime issues with Kyle, they whined about pushing an agenda, which I'm sure they did. Having real-world issues in comics is not an agenda. Comics have always been a look into the current generation. Making a character gay or bi doesn't change who they are. They are still a hero and they still save people. Comics are just trying to become more diverse and new characters are usually ignored. While yes, I can see that it is shocking when a long-term time character suddenly changes, I gotta say it just doesn't bother me. Comics have been rebooted countless times and it's always been to update their heroes, or sometimes they have to change to keep pace with the times. I read comics for the big fights and surprising stories, so changing their sexual orientation or skin color doesn't bother me because they still fight for what's right. I do want to say I think you both have been very professional about your opposition to that, and I wasn't offended at all, although I somewhat disagree. This email is in no way meant as a criticism or harsh disagreement to anything you said, they're just my opinions. Even when you rag on Simon, I don't think you do it out of hate for who he is. Keep up the great work.
All right, Ryan. Well, there's a lot to unpack in this. So I will touch on a couple of things, and then Myron will probably have to pick up on the other stuff. I appreciate everything he said in this email. I mean, it isn't our job, like even being on this podcast, to negate or to degrade any character for any reason whatsoever. And comics have always been juxtaposed next to the social times we live in, and I know there's a reason why writers do that, because me being a teacher, I taught that course on comic books as literature, and a lot of stuff is written for the times that they're in. I mean, even when you go back, a lot of the old time comics, African Americans were consistently displayed as monkeys and working elevators, And yes, it's degrading, but I think where people differ is they look at it for the face value and they automatically get offended by it or insulted by it, for that matter, without understanding, okay, yeah, it's not meant for the times that we're in now. Unfortunately, and I use that word adamantly, unfortunately, it was placed in the context of the times of which it was written. And that's just history. History works that way. And a lot of what he said in here makes sense with the agendas. I mean, every writer out there, has an agenda, whether you like it or not. I mean, even Grant Morrison does, for that matter. It may not be as transparent as you may think, but deep down, each writer has his or her own agenda when they're approaching a character. As far as sexual orientations and racial differences, changing a character just because, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with it or not, because sometimes I don't understand what's the point, but I also do know that there's a touch in this social atmosphere that we're in where diversity is at its high point, and to go on what he said about Hal being in the next movie, I tend to agree. I tend to think that if you're going to play that card and you're going to have a Green Lantern movie, knowing WB and knowing DC Comics, they're going to play the diversity card because that's what they're known for, you know. And I think that John Stewart would be at the head of a Green Lantern movie moving forward, not because he's not a good Lantern, you know. He may not be my favorite, and I particularly don't care for him as a character that much, but because he's an African American, and not only that, but because John Stewart is I think he is the first African American hero in DC's universe of characters, if I'm not mistaken. So it would only make sense that Warner Brothers would pull that card at the time when they're making a live action movie, and I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay with that in the sense that I like Hal Jordan, and he's the one that and I like Jessica Cruz too. So he's always been the one that I've known for so much longer, and he's always been the one character that I don't know if I relate to, but he's always been the one I've been more comfortable with. Not because he's white, not because he's hetero, but because he's Hal Jordan and his actions and things that he does and the way he goes about being a Green Lantern. Those are the things that I tend to enjoy, you know, much like somebody might like Kilowog for that matter, or Kyle Rayner, you know, or even Simon Baz, you know. I mean, that's just who we are as fans. But at the end of the day, we all have to respect each other's opinions, even though we may not agree with them, much like Ryan did here. You know, he may not agree with us, and I'm cool with that because Ryan's a fan of the universe just as much as we are, you know. And it's okay for all of us to have these different opinions when we approach these books, because that's what makes fandom so diverse in its nature. I just don't like it when it touches the toxic level that people tend to drive to. You know, not one is better than the other. I mean, you can argue the point. You can argue the point ad nauseum, and at the end of the day, more often than not, you're going to come back to square one because you're not going to want to change somebody. You're not going to change somebody else's. I'm never going to change Myron's mind when it comes to stuff, you know. And he may not be able to change my mind, just like Myron doesn't like Jessica, you know. And I've never been on this podcast to try to change Myron's mind of why Jessica is such a great Green Lantern. I just like her because of her character. I like her because of what she's went through, and I like her because she's just a complex character that fits the narrative really, really well. Simon Baz, on the other hand, I never related to him. I couldn't. I didn't care for him. I thought he was insignificant, and I thought he was a character built for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. And I hope I'm explaining this as best as I can, Ryan, whenever you listen to this podcast, you know. And as far as the actress from Doom Patrol, yeah, I'd be happy with her being Jessica Cruz. So I don't know if Myron's watched Doom Patrol or not, but I mean, she'd be a good fit for that role.
I think she's good in Doom Patrol.
And she is, and that's why I'd be hesitant about her pivoting over to a large role like that. I think she fits that role pretty well, and I hope she stays with it longer. So I think they can find somebody else. Even a no-name actress to play Jessica just as well, and probably better for that matter. So, but at the end of the day, hey, opinions are opinions, and I appreciate Ryan for who he is, and I appreciate Ryan and his opinions.
Yep. And thanks, Ryan, for sending that. Just to add a couple things. One of the things you talked about is there an in-universe reason why Hal's been gone? They have not really explained it. Even when, you know, as we're reading the Geoff Johns series, they didn't really explain to people what happened to Hal. I think people assumed he died during the Coast City explosion because nobody saw him. And then now that he's back again, they don't question it. They figured he must have gone somewhere, and he's just now back in the picture again. In universe now, he doesn't really have a job on Earth, so I don't know whether anybody's looking for him. But yeah, I don't know. You know, and he showed up and kind of flew in that one issue, and that was it. I don't really know how to take it, but the entire time he was gone as Parallax Inspector, people just kind of presumed that he died during the Coast City explosion because there really wasn't much left. You know, so many people were atomized that you don't really have a definite count or a death toll or no, you know, other than people who disappeared, you know, you presume he's dead at that point.
And I would also assume that during Final Night, you know, your core your core characters in the DC universe, like, Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman and all them, knew who Hal Jordan was and knew he was Parallax at that time, but I guess, for lack of a better words, the general population wouldn't have known that would have been Hal Jordan in that role.
Right, right.
And conversely, coming back as Spectre afterwards.
Yep. So his identity has remained pretty much a secret. And Hal's really the only Earth Lantern up through the Kyle Rayner era, up until Kyle. Kyle kept a secret as well, but John and Guy never really ever did. And then, to talk a little bit about the Agenda Comics, you brought up the whole hate crime issue and Denny O'Neil. And I don't think back in the day anybody said anything about Denny O'Neil pushing an agenda. My own personal opinion on the O'Neil Adams stories was that they kind of sacrificed character for story, but it didn't matter. It is what it is. It's a thing of its time. I don't recall if during the hate crimes issues during the Kyle Rayner era, if they whined about it or being an agenda. I know that when Judd Winnick went on and left Green Lantern and wrote Green Arrow, then he invented the character Mia Dearden, who was HIV positive, and I think that's when people started to roll their eyes a little bit. And that every time Judd Winnick goes to a book, there's a story about this topic. I think you started to see a little bit of it then, but I don't believe at the time that Green Lantern came out that was an issue, because back then homophobia was really at its strongest, and it was a very relevant issue. And I think it's good to talk relevant issues. I think sometimes when we hear people complaining about agendas in comics, it's not so much that they're talking about real world issues, but it's how they talk about real world issues, and that sometimes they hammer home one point of view and don't reflect both. And to me, comics are more interesting when you see two different sides, and we as the reader are left to decide for ourselves how we feel, rather than the writer telling us how we're supposed to feel.
Exactly, and that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Good point. In terms of John versus Hal in the movies, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I think we're still going to see Hal because he is synonymous with Green Lantern. I mean, the whole mythos from 1959 on was built on his shoulders. And I don't think we're going to go away from that. I think even when you look at the Fandom logo, the graphic that appeared in the comics this week, Hal was the Green Lantern they chose. So I don't think he's gone by any sense from being on the screen. I know there's a whole generation of people who see John as the Green Lantern from the cartoon, but there's even more people who saw Hal between Super Friends and Green Lantern the Animated Series and the movie. And as much as we continue to see things from Ryan Reynolds in particularly, who can't seem to let go, there were still a lot of people who didn't mind that movie and don't think it was that bad. Yeah, it didn't do blockbuster business, but I don't think that soiled anybody in the character. I mean, how many reboots have we gotten of the Hulk?
True.
So,
and nobody talks about that, you know what I mean? Like, nobody goes back and rails on the original Hulk. I forgot the guy who played in that character. And then, of course, Edward Norton came later, and nobody rails on those. It's almost like they're a forgotten part of Marvel's history. It's almost like when Iron Man came along, everything else just got erased and nobody ever rails on it or talks about it anymore. Right. It's the same thing with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man,
Right. Or think about Daredevil. Everybody kind of railed on the Daredevil movie. It didn't stop there from being a TV show. So,
yeah.
I don't know as if I put much value in the movie did poorly, so we're not going to see Hal again. I just don't agree with that. And, I don't want to get into the politics of comics and stuff. I think we've kind of already talked about it. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but, when we pick on Simon, it's half-hearted. I think you and I both don't like Simon for what he represents.
Right.
And that's
right.
I disagree with new comic characters don't get over. Look at how many characters were created during this Geoff Johns run that are still around. Dexter is still in the comics. We still see St. Walker once in a blue moon. No pun intended. Atrocitus. We still see those things. I just think I personally, and I know there's a section of fans that feel this way, and there's sections of fans that don't feel this way, but I feel changing the character to check a box off on a diversity report card is not very creative. But That's just me.
No,
You know?
that's totally true. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, creating a new character to fit a new mold to me would be a lot easier than rebranding one. But I'm not a writer, so I'm not sitting at DC Universe. I'm not sitting at DC, in their bullpen, trying to pitch them an idea. But I mean, to me, being a good writer is coming up with a new character, with a new idea on a character, and presenting them to the public in an easy way than just taking a character and saying, okay, we're going to make such and such this way now.
Right.
It's
right.
not. It's hard. It's harder to do. Other than the fact that if you're going to take a character and make them evil, as opposed to making them evil to good, I mean, look at Harley Quinn for that matter. I mean, she's good, she's evil. I mean, she plays both that role really, really well. But that's her character. It's different when you take Hal Jordan, and you turn him evil in the Parallax, and then you pivot into the Spectre for so long, and then he comes back as Green Lantern and he's a hero again. It still was the same character. No matter if you've read all the Spectre run, or you read during the Parallax stuff, it's still Hal Jordan. You can tell with his narrative, even with the writers presented him as the same type of character, and that to me is what makes a character complex and rich, to be able to pivot into those different roles, but still come through unscathed from it, but alternatively changed for the better. And I think that's what Hal Jordan represents.
Very true. So
right on.
Thanks again, Ryan, for sending your comments and your feedback. We're going to be back. We're going to do a couple of episodes kind of back to back here pretty soon, because next week we have not only a new issue of the Green Lantern coming out, but we also have Green Lantern Earth 1 Volume 2. So we're going to do next week, we're going to record an episode on the new issue of Green Lantern. And then a week after that, we'll do the Earth 1 book, just because I think that's going to take it longer for us to unpack that one and digest what's all in it, because it's a much larger book. But I'm really excited for the next 2 weeks, that and the Fandom. So the next 2 weeks are going to be really fun, I think.
Oh man, the Fandom's going to give us a lot to talk about, man. I hope they just give a lot of clues on what they're going to do with their books. I mean, I'm looking forward to the Snyder stuff, but I really want to know what they're going to do with their books moving forward, because, I mean, to me, I think a good change is coming, and I hope DC follows through with it.
I hope so. So we'll be back next week with some more Green Lantern conversation. Until next time, take care of each other out there. Make sure that power ring is charged, and make every day your brightest day. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.